there. Welcome to Satellite Stories, where we interview those who have encountered Jesus through video games and nerd culture. We're part of the LTN Podcast Network, and today we're going to hear another story. Hey friends, thanks so much for joining us for Satellite Stories once again. And today we're going to hear from David. He's back. He was here for season 1, back for season 2. Season 1, he talked about the origin of satellite gaming. Now we're going to specifically talk about the origin of our after-school programs, talk about how our after-school programs have impacted the lives of students within our ministry. We're so excited. One more thing, in case you can't tell, my room's a little different. My setup's a little different. Things are different. That's how it's going to be for a few months. I have a student living with us. He just graduated high school. He's on his gap year, really believing in him, pouring into him, and he's going to be living in this space for a few months. So he's going to let me use it a couple of times to record the podcast each month. But for the next few months, things are going to be a little different. Just roll with us, have some grace, and let's have a good time. Thanks so much, friends. Excited to hang out with you today. And here we are, another episode of Satellite Stories, and of course, the amazing, spectacular, I don't know very many adjectives that would describe this awesome person, but David, welcome back to Satellite Stories Podcast, my friend. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Yeah, good. I got back from, went to a wrestling show with my wife a couple days ago. That was a good time.
Like, when you say wrestling, what does that mean? Like, just...
like WWE.
Wow, the real deal. Wow.
It was awesome. We went with a couple of friends who, don't watch wrestling, and that's a great experience. Trying to explain to somebody, when you say that guy, you shout yeet. Don't worry about why. You just have to.
You just have to? Okay.
Yeah,
I don't even know a lot of that culture. So when someone says, I'm pretty sure you said, my wife and I went to go see a wrestling show.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to know, who got who into WWE, and did one of you pay the other to go? Is this
okay. So
a unified decision?
Like,
it's your turn to pick, David. We're going to see wrestling.
No, so I've always been very interested by wrestling, but I never actually watched it day to day. And when I tried to, I didn't really like it in the 2010s era. Okay. I tried and didn't really like it. But then a couple of months ago, I watched one of the big events from this year. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And my wife happened to be in the room with me, and she watched with me. And then we started watching more and
She's
more.
Like, David,
and now...
you could do that. You could do that.
No, it's kind of the opposite. Now there have been a few times that I've caught her looking up wrestling classes in our area just for as an exercise class. It'd be cool, but. Yeah. So it's kind of funny because when we're talking to people, she'll be like, oh, yeah, David's been really into wrestling. And I don't call her out, but I know for a fact she has not missed a weekly episode of Monday Night Raw in 2.5 months. She has a favorite. She made little bracelets for everyone that went. She's as much a fan as I am.
That's awesome. What I'm literally thinking right now is I'm pretty sure Radio Matt, the guy from LTN that's going to be editing this video, going through and making sure everything's good, I'm pretty sure he does a podcast about wrestling. So he's probably going to reach out to you. That's funny.
That's the dream. That's what this has all been about, is trying to get on a wrestling podcast.
Oh, I didn't say you could be on it. I'm not sure you're that cool. He needs somebody to talk to. No.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of them. They do a wrestling podcast. I think it's pretty cool. Dude, well, that's fun. I'm glad you had a good time. That was just when was that? 2 days ago? A day ago?
It was Monday.
You're like, it was last night. I'm tired. That's cool, man.
No, it feels like it. I'm recovering.
No kidding. That's cool. Well, good. Well, I did not go to WrestleMania, but I did wrestle my children. That was pretty fun. So we had our own little wrestling match. Actually, I learned recently that when you wrestle your kids at night, after bath and after shower or bath and then to bedtime, they're drying off. There's this cool thing. You wrap them up with a towel and you fold it up and you make them roll around. You actually get their body moving a lot, and then you get them in a wrestling hold. Not even kidding, a playful hold. You're not throwing them through the wall, right? But you're like, hold on to your kid, and they like fight, they squirm, and actually the energy that is like released while they're doing that you'd think like, oh, you don't want to be all high energy before you go to bed, but actually it helps because it winds them up after the shower, and then it helps them cool down. There's actually a lot of study on that. I thought it was kind of cool. So we do a little bit of wrestling sometimes before bed, and it's pretty cute. But that's all I got on wrestling. Now. Today, we were talking before, like, hey, I remember last time we recorded together, we said, oh, we're not going to tell that story live because we're going to come back and tell it later. Well, neither one of us can remember what that story is. I'm sure if we went back and watched, but rather than be robotic and go find, we were like, man, what are stories that people just need to hear about satellite gaming? Maybe not just satellite gaming, but in general, like video games can be used for good. They can make an impact in people's lives. And what better time to talk about this topic than in September when our programs are getting ready to get started. Davey, we got some cool stories about our after-school programs that we have run. So today we're going to talk about our after-school programs. So why don't you start us off by just saying, what do you remember of like either the early days of satellite gaming after-school programs, or like when they first started, because they're very different now, and some of the stories that we share would not be possible with how we started them. So let's just go all the way back, satellite story of the origin of our after-school programs and where that has taken us so far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the earliest thing I can remember about after-school programs was sitting at that bistro that we would get coffee at before satellite gaming was its own thing. Yeah, Birdie's. And talking about just the need that we saw for students to have an outlet to engage in this hobby in a healthy way.
That was like 8 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, and now, like, now that has become... those things that we talked about in that bistro are things that I talk to parents about all the time. That, like, it's crazy that if you like athletics, you go out for football, and the cool thing about football is not the football part, it's all the things that you learn playing football. It's all the things that you learn doing sports. And if, like, I was not a football guy, I did choir and drama, I got a lot of that same value, and I haven't sang in front of an audience since high school, right?
Yeah.
So...
And most people that played football haven't played football since high school either. So.
Yeah, exactly. And like all of these ways that we celebrate and use the things that students are interested in to build them up and to help them adjust into fully formed adults, there's just not a lot of those resources available for video games, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about like what that could hypothetically look like someday. One of the things that we talked about was running an after-school program. And then, do you want to talk about the process of like how you actually got a school to say yes the first time?
Yeah, and it was not us saying you need us. It was them. It was them saying we need you, which is crazy. Yeah. We talked before. If you were here around episode 1 and 2 of Satellite Stories, you heard about how our first event started very small. Our third event attracted some public school attention, and how it happened was they wanted to have us run events out of the school. Well, we weren't technically a school partner at the time. So I was like, in order for us to run an event at your school, we got to pay like $5,000. Like, we can't do that. And they're like, well, the idea is we actually want to pay you to do it. But in order to do that, we have to have you as like a contracted partner somehow with our after school clubs through Enrichment Academy, 21st Century Grant. And she's like, the best thing we could do, this was Shayla. I love Shayla. Shayla, if you ever listen to this, I love you so much. But she's on staff at a school here in town still. And she said, the best way to do it would be to have you get into our after school program rotation. And I was like, oh, okay. What does that mean? She's like, well, what we would need is for you to provide some sort of extracurricular programming after school. So then when you come and you do your event, it's just an extension of our after school programs. It's an event that is kind of accenting one of our after school programs. I'm like, okay. So you're going to pay us on contract to do the thing that we've been talking about wanting to do, just not knowing how to do it. And what's cool is that same mentality is how we're now like expanding into locations like Colorado. We don't go to a place and say like, hey, Satellite Gaming is here in your state. You need us. We are awesome. Haha. What can we do? We just tell people like, hey, you can try to start a gaming ministry. That's awesome. Praise the Lord. We celebrate that. We could also just work together and plant satellite gaming right here. This is what we could provide. And we leave it up to them. And some places say, hey, we want to try to start something. Colorado Springs is like, we want to bring satellite gaming here. In this case, the school was like, we want to bring satellite gaming here. So it was really cool how we're just doing the work. People are seeing it and they're inviting us in. So that's how the first after school program started. And what's cool is it's still one of our coolest programs, of course, because the last couple of years, someone very dear to your heart has been running that after school program. And there's some cool stories around that. I don't know how much you want to share about that. I know that it's the podcast, not about them, but I'll let you kind of talk about that if you'd like. What has happened with that school?
Yeah. So my wife has run the after school program at Claggett Creek the past couple of years, and that has been, I think it's really cool, partially just because Monique loves satellite gaming and she is involved in quite a bit of what we do. But typically it is through me, right? It is like she is helping me with blank for satellite gaming or stuff like that. So I think what was really cool about the Claggett Creek and her running that program is that like it's just her program, and like I had nothing to do with it. I covered 1 week in the 3 years that she did that program, and like that's it. It was just her thing, which is really cool. But
I filled in once, and when I filled in, everyone was like, "Where's Mo?" I'm like, "Oh,
yeah, 100%."
Oh, jeez. Like, wow.
Yeah, they love her.
Yeah. They like, I remember we ask our leaders to like take pictures of like, certain things at the clubs. If we get pictures of kids, just the back of the head, we don't obviously just randomly post pictures of kids online, but she sent us pictures this one time of like, this kid drew her a picture or something like of her and Kirby or something. I can't remember what it was. You probably have it around somewhere, but yeah, it's beautiful.
That's a whole thing of, for some reason, there's something about my wife that makes people want to draw her pictures of Kirby. She works at an elementary school, and she has a box full of pictures of Kirby that kids draw her. And then she has a few of those from Claggett Creek.
I love that. That's so
she doesn't ask for them. She doesn't like. I don't know why this happens, but it happens like every couple weeks.
You know what it reminds me of? My wife will go shopping with her mom and she'll come back with a pair of shoes. Look what my mom got me. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure the entire time you were hanging out with your mom, you didn't be like, my feet hurt. These shoes are really worn out. And then her mom, loving her, says, oh, honey, let me buy you a new pair. So I tease my wife that like when we get things we don't ask for, it's because we bait people. But I'm almost certain Mo is not being like, it would be really cool if I had 5 pictures of Kirby by the end of this program. Like,
no, I think it's just that like they know that she loves Kirby.
Yeah.
And they're like,
and they love her. It's like, and
they love her. So
yeah, that's so cool. I love that. So that's how they. That's kind of, we skipped around a little bit, but that is to say that school, the reason I brought that up is because that school is the school that programs started in, and the direction we're taking this is schools are very different now that we have volunteers that can run programs that don't need us there, right? You said, hey, she does that independently. When we first started, I didn't even know how to run a program, let alone equip someone like Mo to do it, who Mo is a gamer, right? But like anything Mo does with Satellite Gaming is usually with you. Now she could literally just run the whole thing by herself. And I don't need to show up at Claggett anymore because we have a presence there through Mo. I do go to Claggett because I love Claggett, but so talk a little bit more. What did it take to get us there though? Right? Like that didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah. So my first experience at a club was not running one. It was helping you with one at McNary High School.
Wow. That was a long time ago, dude.
I think was our second program, third, somewhere.
Yeah, I think so.
Early.
Think so. Yeah, that was a smelly one. It's a tight little room. Yeah, lots of
Smash players.
Yeah. That's cool. What was that like?
It was cool. So we showed up, and so now if you see our like gear for an after school program, we just call it the after school program kit. It comes with 2 totes, one and like a dolly to roll around the totes on, right? One tote has 5 screens that are specifically for playing games on, and the other tote has some Xboxes, it has some Switches, and it has controllers for everything. Right, and it's all very organized. The Switches have their own little cases. It keeps like the dock and the screen and all the different stuff separated. And like now our kits look great, right? I love our after school.
There's a uniformity to it too. There's like 4 or 5 kits, and they all look
totally
pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you need extra gear, you can just take an extra kit, and you have some idea of like what is going to be in there. You know what to expect. So we can. Like now covering a program is so much easier than it used to be, because now it's just like what the kit looks like because it's identical to your other kit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So before all of that, part of setting up for an after school program was you had to show up super early because you had to take a lot of trips to your car, because at the time what we had for gear was just the gear that was in Jamie's garage. I remember it used to that like whenever I would hang out with you, you would ask if we could drop by Goodwill, just to check for TV screens.
Yeah.
That was because that's thing. Where, yeah.
It worked.
So,
like
it worked. Yeah. No, and it got us here. It's like
we don't do
also,
that anymore.
Thank goodness we're not doing that anymore. But like,
no kidding.
But that's what it took to get to where we are, right? Is like, hey, Colorado Springs has a proof of concept that they can point to get approved for funding and learn how to manage gear and do all this stuff, right? We were trying to make the proof of concept while doing it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
That means Goodwill. You know what I mean?
That meant that if you got a TV that couldn't fit in a tote, that you couldn't really carry with one arm, it wasn't that it was super heavy. It was just like it would. That means for that one screen, and if you had 5 screens, you would have to carry that one by itself. Well, then who watches the gear while you transport it? Do you lock the car and then unlock it every time? And if you don't have a little beeper, then you got to manually unlock your car every time. I mean, like, dude, it would take a long time to get these programs started at first. And this now, there's probably more that could be said about that, like just the jankiness of it. But here's the thing, it worked. It provided us what we need to get where we are. But now that we have ironed out this process, right? So we're kind of still back in like year 1 or 2. We begin to iron it out a little bit, maybe more year 2 or 3. But we start realizing, like, man, there's just a smoother way to do this. And the smoother it got, the more capacity that gave us to give attention to students, because we were less concerned about setting it up and making it technical. So why do we have these kits? Why do we have so much formula to it? Why is there this like clear, rigid process for it? This is how we set it up. This is how we tear it down. Because we've done it for years, and we know the faster we can set it up, the faster we can tear it down, the more available we are for students. So begin to talk about how maybe the smoother that process got, the more available you were to, I don't know, interact with students, or not be so worried about, oh gosh, running an after school program. That means an hour of setup, 45 minutes of teardown, and 2 hours of hanging out with kids. That's a lot. Now it's like a 90-minute program. I could set up for that in 15 minutes and tear down in about the same.
Easy.
Yeah. So walk me through
totally.
that.
So I actually remember pretty clearly, like, maybe year 2 or 3, I was doing a club at Stevens Middle School. And at the start of the semester, we were still ironing out a lot of gear stuff. But I remember that pretty well as like the semester that gear got a lot smoother, because at the start of the semester, I would show up and we had totes, but they weren't. The totes were boxes with all the stuff in them.
Yes.
Right? Like there was no sort of method to the madness, but your gear was in there probably.
Yeah.
I
think it was Miguel and Josh that one time said, I think my dad has some furniture carts. We used those bad boys once and we were like,
yeah,
oh, why don't we have 10 of these?
Never going back.
Oh my goodness.
Never going back. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
So
I had to throw that in there because that's, yeah.
No, you're great. So at the start of the semester, I would go in and like show up super early, and I just had to focus all the way on setting up the gear. And I had like, I was set up in a classroom where there was a teacher doing her like last period like cleanup stuff. Mm-hmm. So I had from the previous class until the end of school to set up, and I barely had enough time at the start of the semester, right? And as the gear got cleaned up, as the semester progressed, I started getting done with gear faster and faster. And like, also part of that is just I got better at running a program and knowing how to set stuff up. But as that process got smoother, I had more free time. So I started talking to that teacher more and just started talking about what she experiences with her students, what this club means to her, why she volunteered her room for that program.
That's cool.
And that was a big sort of eye-opener for me of that now I get to help run the trainings for after-school programs. One of the things that I really try and hammer home is that our volunteers are fantastic and all pretty much right away get that we are there for students. That story really reminds me that like we also have an opportunity to serve teachers and to serve the other people in these schools, and that like
so true.
Like we are on the same team. We want the best for these students. Let's work together here and let's serve the teachers as well as the students together, you know?
Yeah, I really like that. And I think I love the training you guys do, you and Nathan, by the way. And Nathan is our after school program director here in Oregon. The reason he's not on this is because he's actually got a job to do. He's running after school programs and getting all that ready. I think his first one officially starts today, right? Like, or is it tomorrow? I can't remember what he said.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. He's super jacked about it. David has been doing the training curriculum on that, but I love the training that you guys have been doing and talking about how you are going to interact with adults while you're running clubs. You're going to have those interactions. So we're also there to serve them. Now, the beautiful thing, I don't know if this is the same club or not, but we do have obviously countless stories of students that were just positively impacted by our programs. There's a specific story that you share sometimes, and I'd love you to share that story now. But I think where it fits in is, yes, we are serving parents by helping their kids. Yes, we are serving teachers by helping the students in their classroom. This is all about the students, and stories like what you're about to tell, I think, are not possible if this process is not smooth. Yeah. I don't want to say not possible. Like God can use like any janky program, but the more smooth we get at this, the more we care about the minutia of like, how do we wrap the cables? Well, we care about how we wrap the cables so you don't have a broken cable, so you don't have to try to find an extra one at the school, right? The reason we care about how the switches are in there is so we make sure everything's there. So the more we get organized with this, the more available we are for stories like what I'd love for you to share now.
Yeah. So it was a different school, but the same year that a kid started showing up, and our gear was a lot better at this point, but it wasn't what it is today. And it was still it wasn't like necessary to get help tearing down anymore, but it was still helpful, right? So there
are other reasons we would have students help with this, right?
Yes, totally.
So maybe you'll get to that.
And yeah, I'll get to that in a little bit. But so, it's pretty easy to identify what students you should ask to help, because they're the ones who are like so invested that they would love the opportunity to stick around for a few extra minutes, even if it's just wrapping cables and ranting to you about whatever game they're currently in love with, right? And so this kid was like that, where he loved Super Smash Bros. And wanted to talk to me about it constantly. And after the club was over, I would say like, hey, can you help me tear down? And he was not the most helpful But that's not the point. The point was I wanted to hear more about what got this kid so excited, right?
Yeah.
And so every week he would help me tear down, which really means I'm tearing down and he's slowly wrapping a single cord, telling me the frame data on Jigglypuff aerial attacks.
Oh, man. Dude, before you say his name, I want to see if I can think of it. So keep telling the story. I'm going to see if I can remember his gamer tag, not his IRL name. He had a gamer. Oh, I'll think of it. Keep going.
Okay. But he's helping out, and he, every week, it's like clockwork. He is excited to help me tear down. And then one week, he just doesn't stick around. And then the next week, he doesn't stick around. And the third week, I'm like, what happened to my little buddy? What happened to my helper, man? And he goes like, actually don't need to do that anymore because I made friends at the club, so I can actually I have people to talk to now, which is very funny and is the point of the club. I'm very excited that he made friends there. It's just very funny that he's like, oh, I don't need you anymore. I have friends now.
I love that.
But that does a couple of things to me. One, it reminds me that I was giving him an outlet to talk about his favorite thing in the world because he just had nobody else that would listen to him.
Mm.
Right? That humbles me quite a bit when a kid is being annoying telling me everything they know about Minecraft.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that means something to listen to that, right?
For sure.
Two, it helps me remember, our clubs are really great for our students, even if they don't result in us being their mentor and working with them for years and years. That club was still very impactful for him because he made friends, and I know that guy still, and believe he just graduated, or he's about to graduate. And he is still friends with some of the guys from that club.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
He reached out to me last year or something, and I was like, "Oh, I know that name because it was a gamer tag." Yeah. Just what? Do you mind sharing the gamer tag? I don't know how. I don't know. It was what? Squish, and he just played Jigglypuff like crazy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, dude. Oh my goodness, that's so crazy. Anyway, go on. So he's like adult now. It's obviously made an impact on his life. Yeah. Oh man. That's crazy. So,
that was not an isolated incident. That concept of having a kid stick around and while you're tearing down, having really cool stories come up from that. So it was happening so often, we came up with a name for it, and that was Blacktop Talks. Now, our gear is set up in a way that it really won't save you that much time to have a kid help you with it, but it is still built into the way that we do things. In that training, we still talk about if you have an opportunity to invite a kid to help you tear down, do it. And sometimes that even means your gear will get torn down slower. Still do it. Because we saw way too many cool things happen in those conversations, tearing down gear, to ever want to stop, right? So we can we joke about how clunky the after school programs used to be, but we wouldn't have started doing Blacktop Talks if it didn't start as a necessity, right? And now we know why it's a necessity, but at the time, that clunkiness led to us realizing that. And I am so glad that happened,
Me too, man. I listened to that story, and it obviously reminds me of 100 other stories of different times at programs where I've had students that walked out. I remember Marco, was this kid who used to just walk out with me, and it got to a point where he wouldn't even help me anymore, but he would just stand there and talk to me the whole time. And if I wasn't a youth worker, if I wasn't there to serve students, I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? But I'm like, this is why I'm here. For this kid, this kid. And it was a big club, but I was like, I'm here for this dude. And then I think of the story of, how we met Jacob, who interned with us previously, of Omar, of Germ and Ishki, and all these guys that are now adults that serve in satellite gaming in different ways. And I still mentor them. I still disciple them on Sundays. We sit around and we talk about life. And these guys, I mean, we needed their help for the Blacktop, because we needed their help for the gear, and it turned into a Blacktop talk because we were taking like 12, 13 consoles, and there were times where like Austin could help me with the club. There were times where we were running that with like 60 kids, and I was the only adult, and they would see me like doing this. Do you have anybody to help you? I'm like, no, dude, like, shoot, bro, let me help. Let me help. And these kids were not, they were not Christians. They were not like, they were just there to beat each other up in Smash Bros and talk trash to each other, and they were super good dudes. Like, they were loving, so awesome. But they thought solid gaming was just, we just bring games and we play. And man, to watch that evolve from like them helping put this clunky gear into these totes, walk out to my car. It got to the point when they'd help me out with my car, I'd have like snacks in there. I had my skateboard, I'd have a soccer ball. And I remember one time doing a kickflip barefoot. And yeah, Germ still talks about that. And I landed it. and man, that was so fun. But talking to those guys, there were times, because they were in high school, man, I'd be out there till the sun went down. And Jesse would be texting me like, you all right? I was like, yeah, just still talking to these random dudes. And now these random dudes, it's like, I'm still talking to these guys, and I get back and babe, there was this one dude named Omar. Oh yeah, he's cool, blah, blah, blah. Now Omar like comes to our house and makes us like the dopest tacos you've ever had, And Germ drives me to the airport at 3 a.m. because he works a night job, So, man, it's so cool to see the evolution of the programs and to hear specific stories of how these programs have impacted people's lives. I don't know. Before we wrap it up, David, is there anything else about after school programs? Like if I am a person who does not understand video games, because I think people that understand video games, they'll get it. They'll be like, oh, this is perfect. But if I'm a person who is just, maybe I'm a pastor, maybe one of our partners in satellite gaming, maybe I'm just a random parent that stumbles, or a grandparent that stumbles across this, what is it you think that like would be the most important thing for them to know about what kind of an impact our programs have on potentially their students in schools? Yeah.
Well, I'll say kind of, I mentioned when we are in the schools, remembering to talk to teachers and remember that we have an opportunity to serve them, right? And I'll tell you the two most common responses I get when I'm talking about that. I'll tell you the three most common. The first, the single most common is people telling me about when they played video games in college.
I had the Atari.
But there's gamers, and their response is almost always, man, I wish I had something like this. Right? So the people who get video games, that is, how often have you heard that? You know what I mean? Like,
all the time. It's probably daily. Yeah.
Yeah. And the people that don't get it, but the people who are in schools who are with these kids and seeing what these kids are going through, what these kids' lives are like, what matters to these kids. For those people, the response I get is, thank goodness someone is doing this.
Yeah.
Because even if you don't have to get video games to get that our kids love them. Students care so much about these games, and there's kind of a sense of not necessarily dread. There's definitely some of that, but I think a sense of concern about video games are huge, and a lot of people don't know what to do with that because their students care a lot about it and they don't know how to engage. And when we tell them we have a solution, we have a proof of concept, we've seen that this works, the most common response that I get from people who don't play video games is relief.
Yeah.
And excitement that somebody does get it.
Particularly when they see it happening. They're like a fly on the wall for it. They're like, wow. And to be honest, maybe this isn't your experience, but I've had experience where teachers would maybe say something or hear about it, or school administrators would hear something, but then they show up and they see it and they go, okay, I get it.
Oh, I get it.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine
Absolutely.
explaining American football to somebody who does not get it and just be like, oh yeah, they just run into each other and hit each other. Like, no, there's so much more to that. Well, I can't explain it because it's a sport and you don't get the sport, but they come and they see the camaraderie, the mentorship, and they're like, oh, this makes sense.
And a lot of it too is that like the only experience that they have, the only concept they have of video games in the lives of their students sometimes is an isolating one, is a destructive one, is the reason that they didn't do their homework.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't blame anyone whose defenses go up when they hear we're bringing video games to school. But when you actually get to see it and you get to see how much this contrasts that this is the opposite of an isolating destructive habit in the right context, like, that's why I love that our programs typically happen either in a classroom or in like an auditorium, or people can see what we're doing, because when you see it, it challenges those ideas of what video games are.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it changes the culture of a school when it happens like in the commons, in the cafeteria. You know, it's one thing when it's in a classroom, but we really try to say, you know, and this is for anybody out there who is in agreement with us that these ought to happen. Try to do it in a place where people can see it, where a teacher will walk by on the way to their car after school and go, huh, that's pretty cool. Or like, hey, there's that student in my class. Oh, wow, that's cool. Like, So I love it. I love that you mentioned that. I love that you're describing not just the environment for the kids, you know, for the students, but you really are. And that's a direction I didn't expect us to go, but I love that we did, because it's probably going to be mostly adults listening to this, right? Like many of our students, we don't promote this to our students. They might stumble across it and find it, but the whole idea of this podcast is to communicate to people that, hey, we absolutely love your students, and we want you to be convinced that what we are doing is worth it. So, David, I really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too, buddy. Well, I guess with that, we'll head out, and I don't know, man. You gotta get me into this WWE stuff, or don't. Maybe I won't get into it. So, but just when I feel the itch, I'll just ask you something, and you can you can fill it just enough.
Because I mentioned that not everybody that went with in our group was a fan. One of them asked me to give them a rundown, and I made a 49 slide PowerPoint explaining all the current storylines.
Oh my goodness!
But he's the same kind of dork as me, so it was really helpful for him.
It was good. He was like, that's me too. I can only do that with so many things. I can only do that with so many things. And over the last 10 years, that thing has been, satellite gaming. So that's what I dork out on. David, I love you, man. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being a part of Satellite Stories. And we love you guys, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us as we grow the library of Satellite Stories. We'll see you next time, and don't forget, Jesus loves you, nerds.